Our story starts in the dark in Farmington, New Mexico on January 18th, 2020. 27-year-old Sasha Krause had just finished dinner with her roommates and was headed to the local Mennonite church to gather some books for Sunday school in the morning. She was never seen alive again. Thanks for watching True Crime Recaps. I'm Amy. So Sasha was a devout church member. While others partied their weekend away, she wanted to cozy up with scripture and plan out her morning Sunday school class. She loved to read and write, and she often wrote poetry about her faith in God. So when Sasha never made it home that night, her roommates Lucinda and Lily grew worried. They called several times but got no answer. Now they knew that she had gone to the church, so maybe she just left her phone in the car? They drove to the church and found her car in the parking lot, but Sasha was nowhere in sight. The local Mennonite chapter is a sizable compound off Route 350 in Farmington, New Mexico. She could be in any one of the buildings, so the girls called on their elders for help searching the grounds. But when they found no sign of her, the community turned to the law. Farmington police arrived and asked the standard questions, but Sasha didn't fit the profile of a runaway. Friends described her as a level-headed person, someone who said no to drugs, loved God, and never did anything reckless. The books she came to grab were gone, so it was reasonable to think she left with them, but why wouldn't she take her car? Police searched Sasha's room and they found her purse and money. And when someone decides to skip town, they usually take some cash with them, right? Well, every avenue came up empty, and without a shred of evidence to go off, Farmington police couldn't call it foul play. At least not yet. They treated Sasha's case like any other. Start from the inside and work your way out. Did someone have a problem with her? Did they have a reason to hurt her? Lucinda landed on their radar as the first person with a potential motive. According to the other roommate, she and Sasha had been arguing over a man. But was their petty quarrel enough to end in murder? Well, we've all heard worse, haven't we? Though reluctant at first, Lucinda opened up to Farmington police. She had nothing to do with Sasha's disappearance, and she even offered a DNA sample to clear her name. Although it was a nice gesture, but it didn't accomplish much since the police didn't have any DNA evidence to compare it to. The crime scene, which at that point hadn't even been confirmed, was clean. Next, they turned to Sasha's family, who told police the kind of story you hear on every TV cop drama. She was a beloved member of the community. Everybody liked her. Who would do such a thing? There was no reason why she'd run away either. Police then turned their attention toward John and Anita Lapping, a nearby couple described as nosy by their Mennonite neighbors. The community accused them of setting up cameras to spy on them, but according to People magazine investigates, the Lappings insisted that the cameras were only to watch animals. Either way, there wasn't enough evidence to consider them suspects. The last person to possibly see Sasha alive was Samuel Kuhn, an editor for Lamp and Light Publishers, where Sasha worked. The publishing house was next to the church, but Samuel's wife corroborated his alibi. And officially out of suspects, Farmington police needed a clue to fall into their lap. And a month later, it did. On February 21st, a camper hiking near the Sunset Crater National Monument outside of Flagstaff, Arizona, stumbled upon a dead body. She wore a long gray dress, her hair was in a bun, and her hands were duct taped together. A quick fingerprint analysis told police everything they needed to know. This was Sasha Krause. And just like that, Farmington police pivoted from a missing persons case to a homicide investigation. But finding her body left police with more questions than answers. How did she end up 276 miles away near a volcano in Arizona? Without a suspect or even a reasonable motive, the search for Sasha's killer now spanned an almost 300-mile radius across 2 states. An autopsy confirmed that she died of blunt force trauma to the head and a single .22 caliber bullet wound. The medical examiner recovered the bullet from her skull and submitted it into evidence. There were also no defensive wounds on her body, which threw an interesting monkey wrench into the case. But why? The lack of defensive wounds could mean the victim knew and was probably caught off guard by their killer. Now, most people fight back, but fighting back was against the Mennonite faith. The Mennonites are a Christian branch popular in Canada and the United States. Practices differ between locals, but they all follow a rigorous principle of non-resistance, an extreme take on pacifism. The belief discourages all acts of violence, even in self-defense. So when someone attacks Sasha, She just let it happen. Police never recovered her phone, but they did get her phone records to see where it was pinging between Farmington and Flagstaff. At first connected to a cell tower near the church around 7:52 p.m. on the night she disappeared. The final ping was at 8:58. 60 miles west of the compound near the Four Corners Monument, where New Mexico, Colorado, Arizona, and Utah meet. It takes about an hour and 23 minutes to drive from the Mennonite church in Farmington to the Four Corners Monument, which means that whoever killed Sasha did so between 7:30 and 8:30, stuffed her body in their car, then sped west on their way to Sunset Crater. Police checked everyone's phone records, assuming that their suspect's phone would connect to towers near the church, the Four Corners, and the Sunset Crater. And everyone associated with the church checked out, but there was one phone record that raised suspicion. Mark Gooch was a 21-year-old Air Force mechanic working at Luke Air Force Base in Glendale, Arizona, 437 miles from the Mennonite church in Farmington. The only connection between Mark and Sasha was God. She embraced her faith, he rejected it. Mark's parents raised him in a Mennonite compound in Wisconsin, but he left the faith at a young age. Walking away from the church isn't frowned upon in most Mennonite sects. In fact, children are free to make their own decisions regarding their beliefs. But Mark harbored a deep resentment for the Mennonite community. Sasha, on the other hand, embraced the faith from childhood. She grew up in Texas, the oldest of 7 kids. She parlayed her big sister skills into a teaching job and then used her flair for French and Spanish to join the Lamp and Light community in New Mexico less than 2 years before she was taken. When Mark left his religious upbringing behind, he joined the Air Force, and he was stationed at Luke Base in Glendale. As the only phone pinging off the towers, Farmington police believed that they had their man. And because Sasha's headscarf and underwear were missing, he was first charged with theft. And since Mark was in the Air Force, it was up to the military police to question him. Now, during his interview, he admitted to being in the area where Sasha disappeared. He was apparently, he said, seeking fellowships at 3 different Mennonite communities, Farmington being one of them. But his story, like most guilty parties, didn't add up. He also lied about when he returned to the base the morning after. The security cameras from the Luke base caught Mark leaving his dorm at 8:33 a.m. and getting into his Volkswagen. Parking lot cameras capture him returning at 6:56 a.m. the next day. So if he passed the Four Corners around 9 p.m., it would take him about 6 more hours to reach the base, putting him there around 3 a.m. So what did Mark do for 4 hours between the Four Corners and Luke's base? Was he hiding Sasha's body? When the military police asked him if he was involved in Sasha's murder, he denied it. Flat out. No remorse, no emotion. And then he asked for a lawyer. Well, another group of cops searched his car and found gloves, binoculars, and a receipt for a car detailing dated on the same day they found Sasha's body. Though it was all circumstantial, the evidence was enough and military police arrested him on the spot. And still, he showed no emotion. With Mark in custody, police had the authority to dump his phone for any evidence. And they found text conversations between Mark and his 2 brothers, Samuel and Jacob, talking about his disdain for the Mennonite faith and just Mennonites in general. Apparently, he'd been keeping tabs on Mennonite communities around the base, which explains the binoculars in his car. But, why? What was he looking for? What did he think they were up to? I mean, sure, some Mennonite beliefs might sound a little strange to the average person, but they're peaceful people. Did he fall victim to some wild conspiracy theory? Was unchecked mental illness to blame? Or did he just harbor some deep-seated hatred for the faith that raised him? What did these people do to this guy? His text to his brothers didn't shed much light on his reasoning either. He wrote things like, "Even this morning's surveillance was boring," and "a bunch of old people without much to live for." The 3 brothers all seemed to feel the same towards Mennonite people. Jacob was a Virginia state trooper at the time, and he texted his brothers saying he ticketed a Mennonite motorist, and then he intentionally coughed on them, hoping to give them corona on their way to a wedding. He resigned after the text went public. On the day Sasha went missing, Samuel and Mark exchanged several calls for a total of about 90 minutes. See, Samuel is an IT professional, and Mark was calling him seeking advice on how to erase the memory on his devices after he got arrested. Google locations, phone data, anything that could implicate him in the murder. He also asked Samuel to fly from Wisconsin to Arizona to get his gun, a .22 caliber rifle. A Mark's trial began at the end of September 2021, with both sides calling their own ballistics experts to talk about that bullet that was pulled from Sasha's skull. Now, the prosecution's expert linked the .22 caliber bullet to Mark's rifle, which served as the proverbial nail in the coffin, but Mark's lawyer called the report into question. In the end, their dispute wasn't enough to sway the court. In October 2021, the jury found Mark Gooch guilty of the first-degree murder and kidnapping of Sasha Krause. And in January, a judge sentenced him to life in prison without parole. Now, before the guards led him to jail for the rest of his life, someone from Sasha's family stood before the court and read a letter penned by her mother. In it, she described Sasha as being more than her daughter. She was her best friend. And the court also heard one of Sasha's poems titled If I Die Young. She wrote that 8 years before she did in fact die way too young. But a different one of Sasha's poems titled I Do Not Walk Alone is what tugged at everyone's heartstrings. And you gotta hear this. The final stanza reads, when stress and fear shall take their toll, when cruel tyrants grasp my soul, when death and all its horrors roll, I shall not walk alone. And today her headstone reads, she did not walk alone.
And that's your recap.
Thanks for hanging out with us today.
If you like getting all the crime in half the time, go ahead and tap that subscribe button and the bell so you never miss a story.
We're here Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays, but don't go away. Catch up on more recaps right here, right now.
Until next time, take care.